Welcome everyone.
Fantastic.
Welcome to Paranoia-X, and welcome to an afternoon of cybersecurity. My name is Tormod, and I'll be your guide throughout this webinar. Given the circumstances, I am very pleased that we were able to pull off a Paranoia event in one way or the other after all. And I'm very thrilled to be able to present to you two of the most leading cybersecurity experts, and of course acclaimed public speakers as well. They do not need any introduction, but I will try and introduce them in the best way possible. They're Monica Verma and Chris Roberts. Having both in the same room is actually quite unique, and we're very proud of achieving that. And we are also pleased to see that so many of you have attended the webinar. So without any further introduction, I think I'll just go straight on to the first presenter. And Monica is considered actually to be a leading spokesperson of cloud computing innovation and the application of InfoSec in support of business and society. Monica Verma is a highly respected cybersecurity expert and also a public speaker. Her merits speak for themselves, having received Norway's Outstanding Security Performance Award in 2019, and also being a member of the Cloud Security Alliance. Speaking 5 languages, she is no stranger to challenging her comfort zone. However, I believe that today she is truly in a place of comfort. At least I hope so. She'll be speaking about disruption, technology, security, and of course, how our changing mindsets are triggers to moving business and society in the direction we like. Today's talk couldn't even be more topical. What parallels can we draw between a pandemic and cybersecurity? And how can the learnings from COVID-19 be applied to support our business, clients, and society? I really cannot wait. And without further introduction, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Monica Verma.
Thank you, Tormod, so much. That was a very humbling introduction. I think you said way more than I deserve the credit for. That was very nice of you. I really appreciate. First of all, I would like to thank you, both you and Annette and Watchcom, for giving me the opportunity to be here to talk about the topics on cybersecurity, and something that I hold very dear to me, something that I've worked for the last many years in helping build cybersecurity in a way that it not only is seen as something one needs or a restriction or control, but more so much as something that is differentiating your business, that is supporting the society. And I've been involved in that for many years now, and I really believe that that's where we need to go ahead. So it's also fantastic, just to give some credit to you guys, that pulling this off, given the circumstances, it's really a big honor to be here at Paranoia-X today. So I'll get straight into my talk today. We are amidst a pandemic, and we have seen how there have been changes to the society that have been very drastic. But the whole world and the society has actually taken it quite well. And the way we are adapting to the changing environment, the way we are adapting and adjusting to the new world, which will hopefully be our forthcoming world and not new anymore. It's amazing to actually see that. And what parallels can we draw from this learnings that we have now amidst Corona crisis? And I'll be talking a little bit about that. And then once I've discussed that, I would like to go into the whole idea of what can we do with these learnings, and how can we use the technological disruptors to our benefit? How can we use them to strengthen cybersecurity, to serve as a business differentiator, and to support society? So what is a pandemic, right? A pandemic is a crisis situation that happens usually in terms of infectious diseases when it affects the entire world, right? It's a global outbreak, and it's a world crisis. That's what a pandemic. That's when WHO also declared COVID-19 as pandemic. And we have seen various challenges during this pandemic. The spread of infection has been drastic and very fast. The way the economy has shut down, and it's now slowly starting to reopen, and the way the measures that we have taken in the world and the society today to contain it as much as possible and flatten the curve. And what are some of the few challenges that I want to take up today? By no means I'm a pandemic expert, but these are the parallels that I've drawn from the pandemic that we are facing and towards cybersecurity. So if you look at it, I categorize 4 of these things that I believe accelerate and are some of the few challenges amidst the pandemic. We have way higher globalization and increased globalization in the world today. We have massive interconnection and digital interconnections in the entire world, both at a societal level and at the digital level. And then when we discuss this COVID-19, one of the challenges that we're facing is that we are not immune to this virus, right? That's what causes a very big challenge. We don't have immunization for it. We have not gotten immune due to herd immunization, not yet. We don't have a vaccine yet, right? But these are the known unknowns of the crisis that we're facing today. Then there are these known unknowns that we don't know, right? Before COVID-19 started, we didn't know that COVID-19 would spread to the world the way it has. We didn't know this variant of the coronavirus existed. There were a lot of these unknowns that we didn't know. So when we have this globalization, interconnection, and various known unknowns and unknown unknowns, how do we still deal with a crisis? What are the parallels we can draw from a pandemic and a crisis like this towards cybersecurity? So what are the similarities here? Actually similar. We are a fully globalized economy today. In the world, we have globalization. We are digitally interconnected to the extent at the level that we've never been before. All the technological disruptors of the world today, whether it's cloud, whether it's Internet of Things, it's mobiles and all these things that make it even much more complex. I'm not saying that cloud is a new technology. I mean, cloud computing existed decades ago, but the way all these technologies have interconnected, the way they have disrupted, the way they have innovated, which makes the entire supply chain a very complex network. And then obviously there are cyber threats out there that we are not immune to. We know there are cyber threats out there, some of them that we're not immune to. And we don't know how to be immune to them, but we know that there's some that exists. But then there are these aspects of cybersecurity and cyber threat landscape that we don't know. These are the unknown unknowns of the cyber realm. So it's very similar to understand and take into context what are the similarities between the two situations, right? So how do we protect ourselves? How do we prevent, protect, and respond to such a situation? How do we do that? Before I go into the how, I would like to give a few more examples, right? The Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA, which is a daughter company or a part of Department of Homeland Security, they released a publication that said, has received multiple reports. So this is multiple reports which extends the bigger scope of advanced persistent threat actors. Yeah, something that's out there, that's known, but maybe we're not fully protected against it yet. So maybe the known unknown. Actively exploiting trust relationships in information technology service provider networks because of the way much more advanced and digitally connected supply chain, much bigger supply chains today around the world, making it a global phenomenon. such as managed service providers and cloud service providers, has increased in recent years. And this came out in 2018. So we have seen a lot of supply chain attacks in the last years. And I'm willing to bet that we will see them even more. Why? Because obviously the whole idea, it is way much more profitable for advanced attackers to basically attack a service provider with which they can gain or exploit a weak link somewhere in the big, advanced, and complicated supply chain, but wreak havoc, not just to that service provider, but all its customers, clients, connections within the entire supply chain. So it's way much more profitable, right? And it's way much more lucrative to try to find a loophole. Maybe if you don't find it in a big bank, then try to find a loophole in the supply chain of the bank through some service provider, through the cloud service provider, right? What are the examples of some of the supply chain attacks that we have seen in the last years? You probably are familiar with the AP10 Cloud Hopper, Operation Cloud Hopper, where the attack was done at a managed service provider, a cloud service provider. And this attack basically had an impact on different countries and nations of the world. It impacted at a global scale, right? PwC and Bay Systems that basically did the research, they released a report that said has recently unleashed a sustained campaign against MSPs. The compromise of MSP networks has provided broad and unprecedented access to MSP customer networks. It's profitable to do that, to exploit the supply chain, to exploit the globalization interconnection, right? Another example is the advanced phishing campaign that happened against Wipro, another service provider. Another yet example is the very recent Maze ransomware attack that happened on the huge service giant Cognizant, right? So we have seen increased number of cyber threat attacks that are happening towards the supply chain, and we will just see them increasing even more, especially due to the cloud technology and the interconnections, the way it has happened, and the digitalization that has escalated over the last years. So coming back to the question of, okay, we have seen globalization interconnection that has led to different kind of supply chain attacks and advanced persistent threats that are exploiting this. And as we know, we're not really immune to all the threats out there. And there are some unknowns that we don't know. How do we deal with them? What are the learnings we can take from this, right? So let's take them step by step. The most important thing is to adapt, adjust, and build resilience. Looking at the example of the pandemic, right? When this coronavirus crisis hit us, there were people in the world, of course, who panicked a bit, and we did panic a bit, but I believe the world as a whole has taken a very good approach and a fantastic approach to at least do measures to contain and flatten the curve as much as possible. There is no point in this situation when we have so many unknowns to be rigid in the way we do things. We have done measures like social distancing. Obviously, there have been people who have been not okay with that, and they believe this is unnecessary, and they have not done that. But there are people who have adjusted and adapted to the way they live their lifestyles, to the major part of it in the entire world, actually, right? This whole social distancing or physical distancing of 2 meters or 6 feet apart has been practiced by a lot of us. Then also the whole idea of we're doing this webinar today, the fact that we are adjusting and adapting to the new world and the new society as if it's a part of our life, it's kind of actually commendable. And we have to understand that these technological disruptors that have made the society a bit more complex still can be used to our advantage. And I will talk about it how. So the idea is now we're looking at trying to find vaccine, we're trying to do tests, we're trying to see if it's possible if you are vaccinated, is that immunity that holds forever, or do you need to get vaccinated again? All these things is to kind of build resilience, right? Because these things can happen and they will happen again. So we need to build resilience. But how do we build resilience against when we have both the known unknowns and the unknown unknowns? One of the best defenses against cyber threats is cyber resilience. That is the key. We cannot today just talk about cybersecurity, which is building proactive controls in place, because that helps us against the knowns, not against the unknowns. And there are and will always be the unknowns also in the cyber realm. And if we wish to protect ourselves from that, or at least build a defense strategy, then we need to think about cyber resilience. Cyber resilience is cybersecurity plus business resilience. And that's the whole idea of the adaptation and adjustment, because just building cybersecurity will not ever protect us from the unknown unknowns or also the known unknowns. So number one is building the immunity. That's what we're doing and we're trying to do with the coronavirus crisis. And that's a similar what we need to do and understand in the cybersecurity realm. What is cyber resilience? As I mentioned, it is cybersecurity plus business resilience. What is the key here? The key is to anticipate chaos and be prepared, right? To have a strategy that basically adapts itself and adjusts itself when a crisis happens, which is kind of like an unknown, which was not probably something you could protect yourself against, where there is no sure shot recipe of what controls could be in place to protect you. But you still want yourselves to be protected in a way that the business operations still continue as normal, right? Resilience happens when you're better able to detect, contain, respond to, and more importantly, adapt to cyber attacks whilst continuing normal business operations. And that's what we're trying to do in this economy, right? We got attacked by the coronavirus. The society kind of stopped. We're trying to reopen society in phase-wise manner. In many of the countries, I agree that the society didn't fully stop. Obviously, different cultures and different countries have taken different approach. But the idea really is how to prevent and how to adapt and adjust to a crisis, whether it's a cyber attack or a coronavirus, whilst you're able to continue functioning as normal, whether it's a business or the society. A survey from IBM studies shows basically that 77% of firms lack proper cyber resilience plans, while 62% respondents actually say that it's a critical element to have cyber resilience plan. So it's kind of like strange to see how many people actually understand the importance of it, while so few actually have a cyber resilience plan in place, let alone having tested them. So the key here is I really anticipate chaos and be prepared to adjust and to adapt. The second important aspect of dealing with these unknowns is understanding the exposure, right? That's what we have done with the corona crisis now. We have tried to, the whole idea when it started and became known, it was anticipated, the idea of the information that came out, not the idea, the information that came out was that, okay, it originated or it happened, the massive infection was actually in China, and then it spread to a few countries. But if you look at the news, the way it happened, the cases in Italy, for example, were not known, and the escalation that happened and the exposure that happened of the virus in Italy was so fast and so drastic. So all these unknown unknowns became known at a later stage. And in hindsight, obviously, we can see that we didn't anticipate or we didn't know the exposure to the right extent, right? And this is a similar situation when a cyber attack happens or a security incident happens. At first, obviously, we don't know the consequence and the impact or the true consequence or impact of the cyber attack that's ongoing. We don't know how long the attacker has been in our networks. We don't know how much it has spread or where it has spread. We don't know what kind of access has already been done. We don't know what kind of exfiltration has happened. These are really the unknown unknowns. Or these are basically the known unknowns in the beginning. And before the cyber incident actually even is revealed, that's the unknown unknown, right? We don't even know, we don't know that a cyber APT or IPT is within our networks. So then the unknown unknown becomes the unknown unknown, and we try to find out, okay, what's the extent to it? So, but that's really very much a reactive strategy, right? Now we're already amidst a cyber incident attack or amidst cyber incident. So the key here is understanding the exposure in advance of knowing when or trying to anticipate it, when a cyber attack happens, to what extent is your business exposed or can be exposed depending on the kind of services that you provide. And to understand the true exposure, you need to do risk quantification. The colors of high, medium, and low are not enough. They will not let you know the true cost of a cyber incident. I'll expand a bit on that. So what is risk quantification? It's a financial estimation of the cyber risk impact, including the financial, business, reputational impact, in order to understand the risk exposure, and more importantly, also to ensure right security investment at right time. If historically a cyber attack hasn't happened in an organization, that is no guarantee and no pattern to tell you that it won't happen. So you need to find out the right variables to understand what is the exposure, and history alone does not tell you the fact about the future. Not necessarily, at least in the case of cyber attacks. So when it comes to cybersecurity quantification, I hear a lot of people that risk I took was calculated, but I'm bad at that, right? I mean, I don't know. This sounds so difficult. How do I do this quantification? Well, there are methodologies out there that exist that can be used. But more importantly, it's not so much the framework or the methodology that you use, but the idea of understanding why it is important. What are the key elements of this quantification? So cyber risk is an enterprise risk, right? It's not a technical risk, it's an enterprise risk. It's not just an operational risk. And when you want to do cyber risk management, you need to first and foremost have very well defined risk appetites and tolerances. And then you need to understand the true cost of a cyber incident, and I'll come to that. And more importantly, you need the right expertise and the right competency, which is true for other areas of cybersecurity or generally in other areas as well. So what is entailed in a true cost of cyber incident? Well, the way we have done and the way I see and the way I've worked, built cybersecurity and cyber risk management in many organizations, both in Germany and in Norway, the key is to first have a sound framework, because cyber risks, although are just like enterprise risks, and you have to do the impact analysis, there is one key element that many organizations don't need to take account, which is the threat motivation and capabilities. So I recommend to have key scenarios and key cyber risks, as well as threat factor. Take the threat factor into account when you're doing exposure and estimation of the exposure and risk assessment. And then when you're talking about the financial impact of a true cyber incident or a service that could get attacked or a risk of a service, then it's not important to be 100% accurate, more so much as having a 90% confidence that the best case financial impact and the worst case financial impact is a range that you can provide. And with experience, the range gets smaller, right? You can very easily start with, I don't know, this could cost us somewhere between $10,000 to $100,000. And then when you do this more often and you understand the business a bit better and you understand the variables, then you're able to actually predict with 90% probability or certainty that it's actually somewhere between $30,000 to, I don't know, $50,000. So it is numeric, it is quantitative, it is a range. It's still subjective. Nobody is expecting, and it's not required to actually have 100% accuracy. Precision and accuracy is not the key as so much as the estimation within 90% certainty based on empirical values and based on the true cost of what it would cost you to recover, what it would cost you in terms of fines, what it would cost you in terms of other aspects of the incident, and building something after that. But keep in mind, reputational cost is not easy to calculate, but my recommendation when it comes to reputational cost is to be able to calculate or keep a track of the KPI of customer turnover rate. That's not direct, but an indirect measurement of reputational impact. Third key important element is testing and verification, right? That's what we're doing today when we're dealing with the pandemic and the crisis. We're trying to see if we can find tests and we can test people for COVID-19. And then we're also trying to ensure that we are able to build a vaccination so that we can immunize ourselves, right? And that's true for the cyber realm as well. So it's important to test your business continuity plans. It's important to have and build a cyber resilience plan and test it. And important to also test your security incident management and crisis management plans. Testing is the key. Test, 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 and again, test. And then at the same time, the way we have seen the digitalization works, and now we have all been working from home, and then we've also seen an increase in the rise of phishing attacks amidst this corona crisis due to everybody working from home and being very much more digital than they ever were. It's important to treat all the accesses and do all your verification for authorization, no matter where you are, whether you're working from a home network or whether you're working from a work network. The idea is based on identity and accesses. So you have to verify all the accesses and all the identities before you let anybody in, independent of where they're coming from. And sometimes have the right access, and always have the right access policies in place. Verification is very important. And then the same thing applies also for the policies, right? What kind of policies do you build in place? These kind of policies for security and access actually should be relevant for both when you're working from office building, or when you're working from a cafe, or when you're working from another country. So you need to have these access policies in place, and verification is important before any authorization happens. So the fourth and last element is visibility. We talked a little bit about exposure, right? And it's the same thing. When the crisis actually happened, we didn't have a proper visibility of how much it had spread, right? It's the same thing. If we don't have the visibility in place within our network or our organization and infrastructure, when an attack happens, the task and the pain of finding the exposure, the extent and the impact is way much more harder. The pain is much more difficult. So it's key to have visibility. And this applies even when you're trying to do on going into cloud. And people say having visibility is quite difficult when you're doing SaaS services. And that's correct. Most of the logging actually happens by the cloud service provider, not by you. But many and majority of the cloud service providers do give you some access to logs and verifications. So it's important for you and key for you to understand where is your responsibility of ensuring that you have the visibility within your network and infrastructure, and where is the responsibility that lies with the cloud service provider and how are they managing it. So this is important to ensure visibility exists throughout the entire supply chain. So after having looked at the four key learnings and important elements that one needs to apply to cybersecurity today in order to make sure that it supports your business, it supports your society, I want to talk a little bit about the business differentiator, right? How cybersecurity can be actually a business differentiator. How is it possible? What are the key elements? So what is actually a business differentiator, first and foremost? It's something that differentiates, right? Something that's different and gives you a competitive edge, right? So it's not enough today. And a lot of people say, we have been saying this for many, many, many years. It's not just a matter of if, but a matter of when. And that's correct. But we can't just stop there. It's not just a matter of if or when, but how long has the attacker been in your network infrastructure? Were you able to detect it within 1 day, 10 days, or a matter of 100 days, or maybe a year or two? How much impact actually has happened? What is the true cost of that? What is the true exposure that you have? How quickly can you contain and how to contain? How much have you invested in security and how to invest in security? And when it comes to investing in security, again, do your risk quantification. That's very important. How to continue operating as normal, even when you have been attacked and you're amidst a crisis. How to continue with your business operations, right? There it comes the part of adaptability, right? How can you adapt to the ongoing crisis? And also to a very important extent and level, how to predict. We haven't seen a lot of predictive security yet, but we will see more of them. And I'll talk a little bit about this whole adaptability and predictability in what I call as the cybersecurity lifecycle model. I'll present that to you today. So my focus and my one message to you today is something that I would like to bring to the world and bring to the society today. This is the first time I'm talking about it, and this is where I would like to present my version of the technology adoption cycle, which is based on, which I call the cybersecurity adoption lifecycle. What is a cybersecurity adoption lifecycle? It basically is based on the phases of a technology adoption lifecycle. So this is quite a known phenomena and concept, but it's adjusted and adapted to the cybersecurity realm. And what does it really mean? So if you look into this diagram, there are different phases, right, in the curve, right? There's this early market and mainstream market and so on. And the middle part, which is orange and red, where it talks about the preventive security and regulatory-driven security, this is where majority of our market, majority of our focus in cybersecurity usually lies, right? We're looking into the known knowns. The moment an attack becomes known, we try to patch it. The moment we find out, okay, these are things that can go wrong, we try to fix it, right? We do both pen testings when we also try to build controls, and we try to put controls in our development life cycle. All these are preventive security measures, right? One industry good practices have been there for some time, and they have been repeatedly used and done, then they become a norm in the sense, and at some point, some of them make sense to become a established regulatory framework. So, giving an example, I come from Germany. I have worked with privacy to a certain extent in Germany that probably no other country has, and Germany has had focus on privacy for many, many years. I built one of the frameworks together with some of my previous colleagues, where we did privacy assessment for moving into cloud. That was at least, I would say, 5-6 years ago. So it was very similar to what we do today in GDPR and the consent and all these things. And then at some point, now the framework came out. And the concept is not very new, but obviously, because of the challenges that we have seen, the EU Commission and the framework, they decided to build it into a framework to ensure that basically the same security regulations apply to the entire EU. So this is where majority of the market usually is, preventive security and regulatory-driven security, right? But what is actually business differentiator? So if you look from the perspective of the adoption lifecycle, we really need to focus on the adaptive security and predictive security. But it's not for everybody. It's not necessary that every business has to do adaptive security and predictive security. It really depends on what kind of regulations you have. It really depends on what kind of innovation you have, what kind of digitalization you have, what kind of business you have. So you need this diagram, and this figure is basically for you to understand and help you where in this whole curve do you wish to strategize your cybersecurity? Do you wish to be a part of cyber resilience and be part of adaptive security? Or do you wish to be a part of predictive security? Or do you are okay with just working with preventive security and regulatory-driven security? And then obviously there are these laggards who are just doing reactive security, where when things go wrong, you try to fix them afterwards, right? So this is a concept that I've been working on and that I came with based on the technology adoption cycle. It's not fully mature yet. And there are certain questions and things that I've thought and discussed with people and gotten input on what could be the next step to actually make this concept useful in the cybersecurity realm. And these are the things. Are we able to link or create some kind of risk assessment which would help a business to select a position in the curve or to find its position in the curve, right? What type of business should be in which part of the curve? What kind of typical vulnerabilities will hit businesses in different phases of the curve, right? What business benefits are associated with being a specific position in the curve, and what type of investment is required for different phases. So this is an ongoing kind of like research, a part-time hobby that I do in my private time and that I'm looking into. But the whole idea that I want to present to you today is that it is very much possible to use these technology disruptors and to use these strategies that we have in cybersecurity or cyber realm in order to move from preventive and regulatory-driven security to adaptive and maybe also predictive security. So that's pretty much what I wanted to share with you today. I would like to end with two things. So one is that I have actually decided to launch my own website. So you can find it on monicatalkcyber.com. I've already put a lot of presentations and seminars that I've done in the past years. I've very constantly written a lot of blogs in different websites for different companies and so on. And I just decided that it was time for me to collect and put all of that into one place and one space. That does not mean I won't be writing for other websites and so on, but I would like to help and disseminate information through monicatalkcyber.com. And I would like to end with, in today's digital landscape, cyber risk is not only an enterprise risk, but a systemic risk. And we need to look into how we can use it better to be a business differentiator and to actually help society. That'd be all. Thank you.
Thank you, Monica. And thank you so much for premiering your wonderful model. And I actually, even being a non-technician, understood that and took the point. So yeah, that was great. Thank you very much.